In terms of potatoes, white potatoes, are potatoes part of everyone's plan? I know sweet potatoes we've heard good things about. Are potatoes part of everyone's plan?
Okay, I just have to take this question because for years there was this video circulating on the internet, and people would refer to it as the food fight. Me and John McDougall, you were there, got into it. It was one of Jeff Nelson's events down in Southern California. We got into this whole big thing about potatoes because John McDougall's all about starch, which I agree. Starch is a basis for our diet. Basically, my point was, I think that when we eat potatoes, we should try to stick to the smaller, yellow, red, even purple varieties because they have a higher starch to fiber content, which is why their flesh is waxier than these big, giant, obese russets that we've bred. I just think that they're healthier. Whereas John just said potatoes. So that's my bias.
We got to be careful because when people think about potatoes, what do they really think about?
French fries.
French fries, potato chips, and potatoes they turn into butter boats and all that kind of stuff. Potatoes have a higher glycemic index than other starches, so if you're trying to do short-term blood sugar regulation, sometimes people find they do better with other types, squashes and sweet potatoes and other things. In my experience, if you're taking potatoes with large amounts of raw and cooked vegetable material, even for those people that are sensitive, they can generally tolerate the inclusion of potatoes. We don't particularly restrict them. I think you probably have a different.
Yeah, I guess we make a great cauliflower mashed potato where we take mostly cauliflower and just put a little potato into it, so it's mostly a little more glycemic. I think most of the data on plant foods is that all plant foods don't have an equal amount of protection against cancer, and you can only put so much calories on your plate each day. And we want to encourage eating more voluminous and more liberally of foods that have more powerful protective anti-cancerous effects. That's why we emphasize more colorful plants and more beans in the diet other than potatoes. And we also know that as so many of our patients and clients are significantly overweight with diabetes, that we try to adjust the amount of carbohydrates based on that hierarchical scale of nutritional quality, fiber, resistant starch content, and glycemic effect of those carbohydrates. So when we're dealing with people that are fragile and have medical conditions, we get better results when we give them less potato and more beans. And so they can only take in so many calories a day. And some of these people's diet has to be carefully designed to maximize their weight loss, and because some of them they have metabolic hindrances to weight loss. They don't lose weight as easy as other people do. And we find that when people are more overweight, their response to a potato or a higher glycemic carbohydrate is higher. They have a much more glycemic response. Whereas if they're healthier and thinner, eating a healthy diet, they can tolerate more potato. And I agree, of course, with what was said earlier, that the potatoes of yesteryear and those heirloom potatoes that are smaller and more colorful have more fiber, have more nutrients than the big Idaho or those big potatoes that are designed and are genetically modified to be made into French fries, into what people want to eat. And if you looked at the potatoes from Peru and other places that primitive populations eat, they weren't like the potatoes of today. They were potatoes of yesteryear, were smaller, more colorful, and had more phytochemical index. So I use potatoes, but a little more judiciously, especially with people that are significantly overweight or diabetic.
Yeah, we've even bred our food to be obese.
What do you say?
And the smaller varieties of the potatoes with the waxier flesh actually have a much better glycemic index. And you would make French fries out of those. You would hopefully roast them or include them in a stew or something like that with other vegetables, and they would do much better physiologically.
And I think you bring up a good point. We don't eat just potatoes, and we don't eat just broccoli, and we don't eat just this or that. So the glycemic index of an individual food gets somewhat irrelevant when you start making meals. And so, and the other thing too is that the glycemic index is complicated. I wish it was more usable, but if you go look at the charts, you should eat ice cream instead of carrots and Mars bars instead of white bread or whole wheat bread. I mean, so it's so complicated that I don't even like to talk to people about it, because if they really check it out, they'll be more confused than they were before I brought it up. So unless you have somebody who's like a mono eater, like they just eat one food per meal, you can have a lot of latitude in the type of potatoes that they're eating, because the potato, you know what the best potato is for a new person coming into my office? The one that they're going to be willing to eat tonight, okay? And I keep coming back to this. My personal preference is sweet potatoes and purple potatoes, and I've gained I've gained a taste for them over the years, like we've been talking about it. So what I'm willing to do at this particular point in my life is different than what some newer people were willing to do. So if a russet potato is what you will eat, and you will do that instead of cheese pizza from Domino's, I love russet potatoes. That's our starting point. We can move from there. And the glycemic index gets negated because I don't have anybody sitting down eating russet potatoes for dinner. They're having a big salad and a russet potato and some vegetables, and that usually makes it okay. So.
You're so good. I tell them if they touch a russet, I'm sending the black van to pick them up.